would decrease me, oh God, that you would increase on the inside of me, oh God. Let every word that proceeds out of my mouth come from you, oh God, the edification, the direction, the inspiration, the correction, the revelation of these your people. Touch, bless, and anoint, oh God, in the name of Jesus. God, grant to us eyes that we may see your light, ears to hear what the Holy Spirit says in the church, and a heart that would accept the truth that you will reveal to us on today. Breathe upon us now, God, in the name of Jesus. Now, God, let the words of my mouth, the meditations of my heart be acceptable in thy sight. O Lord, my strength and my redeemer, in Jesus' name. Amen, 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 amen. You may be seated. Amen. Hallelujah. Glory to God. Hallelujah. Glory to God. Hallelujah. Glory to God. Let me act like I got some sense of due protocol order. Amen. Giving honor to God, who is the head of my life. Amen. Amen. Glory to God. To the pastor of this house, Bishop Otis Sneed. Amen. I appreciate the opportunity to come to God's people. And he had a conversation with me on Wednesday as he now was speaking. One of the things he said to me was, you do you. So I'm going to do me. Is that all right? Amen. 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 So if you allow me to treat this like this is High Praise Ministries for just a second. That's the name of the church that I pastor. And I always say this before I get started. I always say, I do not take it lightly that you would give me this opportunity to give to you what it is that God has given to me to give to you. Amen. Amen. Because you all don't know me, let me give you this disclaimer now. So that way, we already have it out the way. So all of the ouches and the ooh, and I can't believe he just said that, y'all already know why. I am a real raw preacher. I don't pull punches. I don't bite my tongue. And most importantly, when it comes to the Word of God, I don't care about your feelings. Amen. Amen. I care more about the Word of God. I care about the God has shown me that my job is to be a mailman. And all the mailman does is deliver the right mail to the right box. I have never, in the history of my life, had a mailman knock at my door and say, hey, Jesse, did you get that letter I sent that was sent to you? Did you pay your T-Mobile bill? I put it in your mailbox the other day. Did you get the electric? Never in my life. All they do is drop off the mail in the right box. Amen? Amen. And they go on. So that's just what I'm going to do. There's a message in the Word that God has. And all I'm called to do is drop it off. Amen. So how you feel about it, take it up with my boss. Amen? Amen. Amen. Hallelujah. Glory to God. So, over the last 2 weeks, God has set me on a course dealing with the promise and dealing with the process. So 2 weeks ago, God had me preach a message called Embrace the Process. And when he talked about dealing with Embrace the Process, he broke down what is entailed in the process. And one of the things that sticks out still in my mind right now is when you go through the process, you have to understand that you are not in control. Jesus. This process has nothing to do with you other than the fact he put you in it. But you don't control it. There's nothing you can do to stop it. There's nothing you can do to start it. You are not in control. So all of your prayers, whining, crying, complaining, or whatever about the process, God ain't dealing with right now. He said, I'm taking you through the process because I have some things I have to get in you and some things I have to get out of you in order to get you to where I need you to be. Jesus. And then he described what it meant to embrace the process. And two things that stuck out to me with that is he said, in order to embrace the process, you have to trust God. That's right. But you also have to trust his plan. Jesus. See, it's one thing to trust God wholeheartedly because we say that we're believers. We come to church week after week and that's what we do. That's what we say. We know the Christian cliche. When somebody says, do you trust God? You're supposed to say, yes, I trust God. That's what we say. But it's one thing to trust him. It's a whole other thing to trust his plan. I got a lot of people who I can trust. I don't always trust what they tell me to do because sometimes it's what they tell me to do sound crazy. And I don't think it's going to work out how they say it's going to work out. So I may do something completely different. God said, if you're going to embrace this process, you have to trust me wholeheartedly and trust my plan. Yesterday we talked about how God said you have to recognize the promise. I'm taking you this way for a reason. Just walk with me for a second. He said you have to recognize the promise. One of the reasons that we can't get through the process is because we take our eyes off the promise that God has given to us. And if we keep our focus on what it is that God has said to us, it'll be so much easier getting through the process. But on today, God gave me a word. It's tailored, as the man of God said, tailored for you. I don't know why God had me to deal more with the process of the promise here. And with this particular message, as a matter of fact, I kept asking God all week long, God, are you sure? I don't know if you've ever had God talk to you about something. You say to him, you sure that's what you want? Okay, God. Matter of fact, I was up till about 3:30 this morning toiling over his word saying, God, are you sure? And God didn't change his mind, so we're going to go with this. So here's what we're going to do. Before I give you the topic, I want to read to you the scripture. I don't normally go in this order, but I got to do this the way God tells me to do. We're going to go to 2 Kings, the 4th chapter. And we're going to start the 8th verse. Now, to be honest, we're going to be doing some reading. It's going to be a minute. We're going to go from verse 8 to verse 37. Typically, when you preach, you don't normally do that many verses at one particular time. But I got to do this the way God said to do it because I have to set this up so that you can get what he said. So 2 Kings, the 4th chapter, starting at the 8th verse. And I'm reading from the New King James Version. And the Bible declares, "Now it happened one day that Elisha went to Shunem, where there was a notable woman, and went and she persuaded him to eat some food. So it was, as often as he passed by, he would turn in there to eat some food. And she said to her husband, 'Look now, I know that this is a holy man of God who passes by us regularly. Please let us make a small room on the wall and let us put a bed for him there, and a table and a chair and a lampstand, so it will be whenever he comes to us, he can turn in there.' And it happened one day that he came there and turned into the upper room and lay down there. Then he said to Gehazi, his servant, 'Call this Shunammite woman.' And when he had called her, she stood before him, and he said to him, 'Say now to her, look, you have been concerned with us with all this care. What can I do for you? Do you want me to speak on your behalf to the king or to the commander of the army?' She answered, 'I dwell among my own people.' So he said, 'What then is to be done for her?' And Gehazi answered, 'Actually, she has no son and her husband is old.' So he said, 'Call her.' And when he had called her, she stood in the doorway. Then she said, 'About this time next year you shall embrace a son.' And she said, 'No, my lord, man of God, do not lie to your maidservant.' But the woman conceived and bore a son. And when the appointed time had come, of which Elisha had told her, and the child grew, and now it happened one day that when he went up with his father to the reapers, and he said to his father, 'My head, my head.' So he said to his servant, 'Carry him to his mother.'" From verse 20 on, this is the meat of where we're going to. "When he had taken him and brought him to his mother, he sat on her knees till noon, and then died. And she went up and laid on the bed of a man of God, and shut the door upon him, and went out. Then she called to her husband and said, 'Please send me one of the young men or one of the donkeys, that I may run to the man of God and come back.' So he said, 'Why are you going to him today? It is neither the new moon nor the Sabbath.' And she said, 'It is well.' Then she saddled a donkey and said to her servant, 'Drive and go forward. Do not slacken the pace for me unless I tell you.' And so she departed and went to the man of God at Mount Carmel. And so it was when the man of God saw her afar off, that he said to his servant Gehazi, 'Look, the Shunammite woman. Please run now, meet her, and say to her, is it well with you? Is it well with your husband? Is it well with your child?' And she answered, 'It is well.' Now when she came to the man of God at the hill, she caught him by the feet. But Gehazi came near to her, pushed her away. But the man of God said, 'Let her alone, for her soul is in deep distress, and the Lord has hidden it from you, and has not told you.' So she said, 'Did I ask for a son, my Lord? Did I not say, do not deceive?' Then he said to Gehazi, 'Get yourself ready and take my staff in your hand, and be on your way. If you meet anyone, do not greet him, and if anyone greets you, do not answer him, but lay my staff on the face of the child.' And the mother of the child said, 'As the Lord lives, and as your soul lives, I will not leave you.' So he arose and followed her. Now Gehazi went on ahead of them and laid the staff on the face of the child, but there was neither voice nor hearing. Therefore he went back to meet him and told him, saying, 'The child has not awakened.' When Elisha came into the house, there was a child laying on his bed. He went in therefore, shut the door behind the two of them, and prayed to the Lord. And he went up and lay on the child, and put his mouth on his mouth, and his eyes on his eyes, and his hands on his hands. And he stretched himself out on the child, and the flesh of the child became warm. He turned and walked back and forth in the house, and again went up and stretched himself out on him. Then the child sneezed 7 times. The child opened his eyes, and he called Gehazi and said, 'Call this Shunammite woman.' So he called her, and when she came into him, he said, 'Pick up your son.' So she went in, fell at his feet, bowed to the ground. that she picked up her son and went out. Ooh, that's a whole lot of reading. Amen. Y'all still with me? Amen, amen, amen. What God has given me to say today to this people is He told me to tell you, fight for what God has promised you. See, oftentimes in the body of Christ, God speaks a word to us. He promises us something. And because we come across some obstacles, because we come across some barriers, because we come across some things that just don't look like we thought it was going to look like when God originally spoke to us, we let it go. Sometimes we actually obtain it. And we think that it's all good because, yeah, I got the promise of God. I realize what God has said to me. I got to praise God. Hallelujah. We come to church, shout, woo, hallelujah. Woo, thank you. And then sometime later, because of life, we lose it. And we never come back in church the same way after that. Because now we're scared to proclaim what the God said. It was just in case this thing leaves like the last one. We don't want nobody looking at us saying, oh, I thought you said God said you're supposed to have that. Maybe you were married and this was the man and the woman for you. Oh, praise Jesus. Hallelujah. Look at what God has given me my good thing. And then 2.5 years later, you divorce. And you're wondering what is going on. But God, I knew you promised this to me. And then we start with our Christian cliches. Things like, well, maybe it wasn't my time to have it. Or maybe God's season was nothing. The season was nothing in my life, and so it was just time for it to go on. Or maybe it was just the devil incarnate and God was trying to release me from that thing. And we try to make all kinds of justifications as to why it is we lost the promise. And the reality of it is, oftentimes we lose the promise of God because we won't fight for the promise of God. So God said it's time to fight for what I promised you. So God had me break this passage down from verse 20 to 37. The beginning portion was more background so that you could understand why the promise was given and what happened. I never believed in giving scripture without giving pretext and post-text. It's something that I learned a long time ago. You get greater understanding when you know what happened before to understand what's going on now. Amen. Sometimes we like to jump right in the middle of a conversation. Try, oh, well, God said this. If you read up ahead a little bit, you'll understand why he said that. That's not really what he said, what you thought he said. So from verse 20 to 37, God had me break this down. And he had me parallel a box. I don't know if I have any boxing fans in the house. I'm one. He gave me to parallel this with a box and how they deal with a fight. There's 5 different points. I'm going to try to go through these as detailed, but as expeditiously as possible. So the first thing that you have to understand when getting ready to recognize this time to fight. And all of these are things that you have to recognize. The first thing you have to do is fight prep. Your preparation for the fight. From verse 20 to 22 is your fight prep. Now watch this. So, when a fighter preps to fight, they look at tape and they look at things to make sure that this fighter is actually even worth their fight. This fighter is worth or is a threat to their stance, or a threat to their position. Okay? So, when the Shunammite woman's son passed, rather than crying and mourning, and can you imagine as a parent, your child has died in your arms and you don't even cry? She looked at this and said, wait, this was the promise that God had given to me. This is the promise that the man of God had prophesied in my life. This is what God said to me. This can't be it. So rather than crying and wasting time mourning over something that's getting ready to change anyway, I'm getting ready to fight. So immediately what she did was she got herself up and said, this is a fight worth fighting. I'm going to go, I got to get to the man of God. I do not pass go. I got to get to the man of God so that I can get to this fight and deal with this fight so I can get back what God promised me. So she prepped herself for this fight. saw what was going on and I testified, this is not supposed to be the season for my son to pass. It's not right now. You have to understand that when God gives you something, you have to understand when its season starts and when its season is up. And if it looks like it's going to die, you have to understand, is this a season for it to go? And she recognized, no, this ain't the time for my son to die, so I got some business to take care of. Okay. I got to go fight. Next thing the fighter goes through is what's called the promotion, fight promotion. And with the fight promotion, what normally happens is you have the weigh-in. And at the weigh-in is when the two fighters stand face to face. And at that point, no one is confused about who the two combatants are. And so the second point you have to understand when getting ready to fight is you have to recognize who you're fighting. Now this one, in this context, is going to be a little, it may be a little much for some folks because I got to take you a little differently than what we're normally taught. What's normally said to us in the body of Christ. We normally think that when it's time to fight, the first thing we got to do is get ready to fight the enemy. Oh, this is a demonic fight. This is a fight from the devil. I got to rebuke the devourer. I got to stand. Satan, I come against you in the name of Jesus. But here's the reality of it. When God has given you a promise, because the Bible says his word is yea and amen, the devil can't stop it. So this attack that you're looking at as an attack ain't got nothing to do with the devil. So then, okay, so wait, we still church folk now. Okay, if I'm not fighting the devil, I must be fighting my flesh. This dirty old, raggedy, nasty flesh. No. This ain't a flesh fight you. You know what God gave me? And it shocked me when he said it. He said, this fight for the promise, you're fighting me. And I said, wait a second, God, hold on. We ain't supposed to fight you. This ain't how this thing goes. God said, no, it's not you're fighting me like you think fighting. You're not fighting against me. But you're fighting to show you how much you want what I promised you. Because if you remember in the preceding verses, the Shunammite woman, the first thing she said to the man of God was, I didn't ask for no son. You prophesied this thing to me. I didn't ask for this. There was nothing in my heart that wanted. I did not ask for this. But if you didn't want it, why are you fighting so hard for it? When obstacles come your way about something that you believe is yours, it shows how much you really want it based on how hard you're willing to fight for it. I see some parents in here. If somebody came at your child, if a grown person came at your child, you willing to do whatever you got to do to get that grown person off your child. Am I right? Am I right? Because that's yours. I'm going to fight because this belongs to me. We got to do the promise of God the exact same way. God said you have to be able to show yourself, not show me because I already know. But I need to prove to you how bad you want what I'm giving to you. So that's a fight poem. You'll find that in context, you'll find that from verses 23 to 28, you have to recognize who you're fighting. You have to recognize that you're standing and saying, God, I want what you gave me. And no matter what comes my way, I'm going to get back what I lost. Here's a note that I put. I want to make sure I say this because I don't want to get ahead of myself. So that statement makes a little more sense. I understand that Satan is the cause of death. But you're not fighting death. You're fighting to get to the source of life. When her son died, it wasn't about the death. When she came to Elisha, it wasn't about the death. It was about my son should be alive. So let me fight to get him alive. don't need to fight death so that life happens. I just need to get to life. You ask any medical professional, when they're dealing with somebody and their person is near death, they're racing the clock to save a life. They're not thinking about death. Death doesn't come into a medical professional's mind until that flat line sits. And sits long enough that they say, okay, call. Because they're trying to get to the source of life. In this fight for the promise that God has given to you, you have to fight to get to the source of life. No matter what it is that God has promised you, no matter what it is that you have obtained, no matter where it is that God is saying for you to go, there's a fight to be able to get there. The fight isn't what's coming up against you to stop you. It's just simply I'm fighting to get to where God has said I'm supposed to get to. I'm fighting to get and obtain what he has promised me because he already said it's mine. So the Shunammite woman came to Elijah and said, wait a second, hold on now. I got to get to you. And what I love about it is when she came, First of all, she never spoke death about anything. She never said anything other than it is well. She went straight past her husband. When her husband said, what's wrong? It's well. When Gehazi asked her, is everything well with you, your husband, your child? It is well. I can't get to you right now either. I got to get to he who promised me what was promised. Elijah in that day, because he was the prophet, stood in the place of God, stood as the oracle of God. Because in the Old Testament, regular folks didn't have access to God like that. So when the prophet spoke, it was as if God himself was speaking. So I couldn't just, in the Old Testament, I couldn't just pray like we can pray now. I had to go seek the man of God. And so she went after him, but it wasn't him she was going after. It was him who was sent him. So I got to keep seeking after God, because God, you promised me. I didn't ask for this thing, but God, you promised me. Fight and recognize who you have to stand and fight. The third is the fight itself. This is verse 29 through 30. This is where a lot of us, we get a little messed up. Elisha sent Gehazi with some instructions. And the instructions were, take my staff, which is the representation of the prophet's authority and his anointing. Took me some time to dig that one out. Because I was wondering, what is the significance of this staff if he laying across his boy's face? It don't make no sense to me why he put the stick on his boy's face. But I found out that the staff and the rod of the prophet represented their authority and represented their anointing. Similar like Moses had when he lifted his staff and the Red Seas parted, or Elijah, and now we have Elisha. These are some things I found out myself, because I promise you, I had never really put a significance on the staff, but he gave him some instructions with this. And the instructions were, go. Don't meet nobody new. Don't talk to nobody. And if anybody talk to you, don't answer. That sounds rude. But you can't get distracted. You have to recognize, I don't have time to be distracted. When a boxer's in the middle of the back of a boxing match, the only two voices he is supposed to hear is the ref and his corner. And the ref is just trying to break up the fight and make sure the fight is fair, so you don't throw him out easier, brother. But his corner is giving the boxer instructions on what to do. Jab not, move, duck, jab. The corner is screaming the instructions. If the boxer misses an instruction, or if the boxer gets distracted by something that's going on, because if you ever seen the big time boxing fights, there's always cameras flashing somewhere. If at any time that boxer gets distracted and looks, he's going to get knocked out. So in other words, if you get distracted in the midst of this fight for the promise that God has given you, you will lose the promise. I don't have time to be distracted. I don't have time to deal with certain stuff. And I know this may sound rude to most of us in the body of Christ, but sometimes I don't even have time to pray for you. I'm in the midst of my fight right now, and I know what you need prayer for is important. But right now, I'm in the midst of a fight I've got to deal with the promise that God gave to me. And right now, I'm in the middle of the fight for my life. I'm in the middle of the fight for the thing that God has given to me. I've got to be a little selfish at this point, and I've got to focus right here. Sometimes we mess up because we lose our focus. And we lose our focus under the auspices of church. I've got to, the Bible says that men ought to always pray and never faint, and that's true. But it didn't say that men ought to always pray for everybody all the time. Because if you watch even Jesus, sometimes said, y'all go on ahead, I got to go pray for myself. I got to get away from y'all. One of my favorite findings when I was doing some study of the Word a couple of years ago was I found out why Jesus had to walk on the water. Everybody loves talking about how he walked on the water. We love talking about Peter when he stepped out on the water. But I always question God, how was you walking on the water? If you was always with the disciples, why weren't you on the boat with them? Last time they was on a boat, you was on a boat with this way when you said, peace be still. Why? Why this time? Well, if you read up in the chapter, you'll find that Jesus said, y'all go on ahead. I got to spend some time with my Father. And when he was done, he said, okay, now I got to get back to work. Even when in the 40 days and 40 nights when he was led into the wilderness by the Holy Spirit to be tempted the enemy, he went alone. Because I got to be focused so that God can speak to me with nothing else in my ear, with no one else in my ear, because the truth of the matter is everybody's got an opinion about something. I can't afford to let your opinion distract me from what I know God said. I can't afford to let what I see, or your interpretation of what is being seen, distract me from what God said. I heard the man of God in Sunday school, he was talking about how this has been one of the roughest building processes he has ever gone through. But I love how he put it at the end. He said, but I still got to keep moving. I got to keep, because this thing is something that God birthed in him. And so he can't let all of these great chairs right now, he can't let that distraction. Now somebody else will come and say, man, like, and he said it, some folks, you need to stop this church. Hold on, you got 4 folks in Sunday school and that's a handful on Sunday morning. Man, quit that. You got other stuff to do. But God gave him a word. Amen. And he cannot move until that word is complete. Such is the same with us, though. God has given you a word, and you cannot move until it's fulfilled. God was not allowed to talk to anybody until he fulfilled what the promise was, until he fulfilled what the statement was. I got to go do what God had through the man of God has told me to do. That's the fight. You got to fight. And when you're in the midst of the fight, and this is verse 31 through 35. This is my favorite part. I'll park here for just a few moments. When you're in the midst of the fight, if you haven't messed up with the distractions, this is where the rest of us oftentimes mess up. You can't stop fighting. You have to recognize that you have to keep going until it's done. So if you look, the staff didn't work. And when Gehazi came back to Elijah, he said, I did what you told me. It didn't work. So Elijah got to the house. And the Bible says he went upstairs and closed the door, shutting out all distractions. And laid on the child. Covered him now with his own word. First it was just the staff covering his face, which was the authority and anointing. Now I'm going to cover you with my anointing. And the Bible says that the boy's body began to warm up. If you know anything about death, your body temperature drops. The fact that your body is warm is a sign of life. And so he felt the body warm up. And he got up, but the work wasn't finished. And he could have said to her right there, I did everything I could do. We came close. Didn't work. And then God could say right now, I did everything I could do. We came close. It ain't work. fighting until you get the victory. There's a song I love that says, it ain't over until God says it's over. But my favorite part about that is the last stanza of it. Everybody loves it. It ain't over yet until God says it's over. Matter of fact, that's the drive of the song. They say that 100 times. The song, it ain't over until God says it's over. It ain't over until God says it's won. My favorite part is the last stanza that it says, keep fighting until the victory is won. I don't care about the fight not being over. Can I be honest with you? I don't really care about the fight not being over. I'm not in this to fight. I'm in this to win. So no matter how long the fight takes, if I got a 3-round fight, a 16-round fight, if I got to sit for 5 years, I got to go for 20 years, I got to go for 30, I got to be like Moses and the children of Israel, walk around that same mountain for 40 years. I'm going to keep going until I get the victory of what God has promised me. Amen. Oftentimes, we mess up because we stop fighting, because we almost got there. You can never get victory in the almost. You can never get your victory in the almost. So Elijah went back a 3rd time. And he laid there until the boy got up. Last point. After you keep punching, you got to claim your victory. That's what she did. The boy rose, he sneezed 7 times, his eyes popped open. And I just said, go call the shoe-out woman. The car's and I'll go get your son. She worshiped. She picked him up. She claimed her victory. I fought, and I got the promise that God has given to me. But I only got it because I had to fight. Does what God said to you mean enough to you to fight? Let me put it the way it just dropped in my spirit, does this ministry mean enough to you that you'll fight for it? Because can I be honest with y'all, this ministry was given to the man of God as the promise. But it was given to the people of God as the responsibility. And so just as much as he's got to fight, we got to fight. Does this mean enough to you to fight? Does what God promised and spoke to you mean enough to you to fight for? The last thing that I'm done, I can walk through it real quick. There are 3 keys he gave me to fighting for the promise. And it's already all throughout the entire scripture. Number 1, seek God. Seek him. Seek him. Seek him. Seek him. Number 2, follow his instructions. You want to fight and win? He's going to give you some words and some things you need to do in order to win. Sometimes it will come directly from him. And just like in this passage, sometimes it will come from the man of God himself. But you got to follow the instructions to the letter. And number 3, keep praying and believing until you receive what God promised you. Will you fight for what God has promised you? If you fight, you will receive. If you don't, it just dies. And everyone stand to their feet, please. Just told you to do an altar call, so let's do it this way. If God has spoken the words, and I'm not one of those